On June 6, 1944, thousands of American infantrymen stepped off their landing craft carrying more than courage. They carried the gear that would keep them alive if luck, training, and timing were on their side. This is the full D-Day loadout of a U.S. GI, from helmet to socks, exactly as he brought it onto the beaches of Normandy. The M1911 .45 caliber pistol was a trusted sidearm, most often carried by NCOs, officers, some assault troops, and specialists like machine gun crew leaders. Adopted in 1911 and already a veteran of earlier wars, this all-steel semi-automatic was famous for its heavy recoil and tremendous stopping power at close range. On D-Day, when fighting collapsed into brutal close quarters among beach obstacles, sea walls, and bunkers, it became a beloved backup weapon when the primary rifle ran dry or was lost. Folded map sections of the Normandy coastline were issued to infantry as part of the meticulous planning for Operation Overlord. Printed on thin, waterproof paper and often cut down to just the relevant sectors, these maps showed beach exits, villages, road networks, and hedgerows inland. In the chaos of smoke, mislandings, and shattered landmarks, they were sometimes the only guide a small group of scattered soldiers had to find their objectives. The M1 steel helmet with netting, known simply as the steel pot, was the GI's constant companion. Introduced early in the war to replace the old World War I-style helmet, this 3-pound manganese steel shell provided real protection from shell fragments and falling debris. The netting stretched over it wasn't just for style. It broke up sun reflections and provided anchor points for local foliage and scrim, giving improvised camouflage that mattered when German eyes were studying every rise and dune. The M1941 field jacket in light olive drab defined much of the early war American look. With its button front and lightweight cotton shell, it was popular for comfort and appearance, but often criticized in Europe for being neither warm enough nor truly waterproof. On D-Day's cold, damp morning, many GIs shivered in these jackets until movement, adrenaline, or later-issue garments finally compensated for its shortcomings. M1937 wool trousers, made from heavy olive drab wool serge, formed the lower half of the standard field uniform. Itchy, yes, but wool retained warmth even when wet, a crucial advantage when waves washed over men wading ashore or when they lay in wet foxholes for hours. These trousers took a beating from sand, salt, and barbed wire and kept going. Underneath, the M1937 wool shirt, in its characteristic mustard shade, provided a crucial insulating layer. Made from wool flannel with a button front and 2 chest pockets, it helped trap body heat in the damp chill of pre-dawn channel air. Many soldiers kept it on even when soaked, knowing that as long as they kept moving, wool would still keep them from freezing. Type 2 service shoes were ankle-high leather boots built for marching across continents. By 1944, many were made in a roughed-out form, flesh-side leather turned outward and treated with dubbing to repel water. Worn with leggings, they were the predecessors to later combat boots and had to face sand, salt water, shingle, and the long marches inland that followed. The M1928 canvas leggings completed the lower leg setup. Before true combat boots became standard, these laced canvas wraps covered the gap between shoe and trouser cuff. They kept dirt, stones, and spent casings out of the shoes and gave some support to the ankles. But lacing them up under pressure, while seasick, loaded with gear, and crammed into a landing craft, was nobody's favorite task. The M1 Garand Rifle, .30-06 caliber, was the beating heart of American infantry firepower. Called the greatest battle implement ever devised by General Patton, it gave the U.S. rifleman a semi-automatic weapon when many opponents still carried bolt-action rifles. 8 rounds, fired as quickly as a man could recover his sight picture, meant a squad of GIs could put a storm of accurate fire onto German positions the moment the ramp dropped.
Supporting it was the M1923 cartridge belt, the foundation of the soldier's fighting load. This heavy olive drab web belt had 10 double pockets that held loaded 8-round N-block clips of .30-06 ammunition. Wrap it around a GI's waist and you had enough rounds for sustained firefights during the initial rush across the beach and the bloody crawl up the bluffs. The M1928 Hersac was no ordinary backpack. It was a complex envelope of canvas straps and flaps designed in an earlier era. When packed by the manual, it wrapped rations, spare clothing, a mess kit, and a blanket into a single long bundle. But if you opened it in the wrong order, half your gear could tumble into the sand, something more than one exhausted soldier discovered the hard way. The M1926 Inflatable Flotation Belt, known as the Life Belt, was issued specifically to help soldiers survive the amphibious crossing. Worn around the waist or hips, it contained CO2 cartridges triggered by squeezing small levers if a man found himself overboard in deep water or knocked off his feet by waves and burdened with 70+ pounds of kit. The M1907 Rubberized Assault Gas Mask Bag was a black, waterproof front-carried bag developed for the invasion. Inside was a gas mask, compacted and wrapped to stay dry in the surf. The trauma of World War I gas attacks still hung over planners, and no one could be sure the Germans wouldn't unleash chemical weapons on the crowded beaches. On the upper arm rode the gas detection brassard, a specially treated paper or fabric armband. Its chemical coating would discolor, turning to warning shades if exposed to certain blister agents, giving at least some chance to detect an otherwise invisible threat in the confusion of smoke and spray. The M1 Bayonet with Scabbard, by 1944, a 10-inch blade snapped onto the muzzle of the Garand. It served as both a close-quarters weapon and heavy-duty knife, opening ammo crates, cutting brush, levering open ration tins, and, when things went truly close and desperate, as a weapon man-to-man among the obstacles and in the trenches beyond the sand. The M1910 entrenching tool with T-handle was still widely seen in 1944. This solid, non-folding spade was awkward to carry, but life-saving once ashore. Under artillery and mortar fire, the ability to dig even a shallow foxhole in minutes often meant the difference between a near miss and a direct hit. Its companion, the M1910 entrenching tool carrier, was a canvas envelope that attached to the haversack with hooks and straps. A leather strap held the handle snug to keep the shovel from banging and rattling while a GI ran, crawled, or hit the surf. The M1910 aluminum canteen, kidney-shaped and holding about a quart, was clipped to the belt in its cover. Filled with water that often tasted faintly metallic or like purification tablets, it was sometimes the only drink a man had for long, hot stretches. Aluminum saved weight, but dented easily, becoming scarred by hard use. Beneath it nested the M1910 Canteen Cup, originally aluminum, later stainless steel. Folded or stacked under the canteen in the cover, it served as a coffee mug, soup pot, and shaving basin. On a tiny Esbit stove or over a tiny fire, it turned cold rations into something warm and almost comforting. All this hung in the M1910 canteen cover, a canvas pouch with snap closures and a wool or felt lining. The lining could be soaked to cool the canteen via evaporation in hot climates and gave just enough padding and insulation to protect the metal from knocks and reduce noise. The M1942 first aid pouch was a small but vital addition clipped to the web belt or suspenders. It carried the individual first aid packet that every soldier was taught to use on himself or a buddy before a medic could reach them. Inside that pouch sat the Carlisle model first aid dressing, often in a painted metal tin. This compact packet held a sterile bandage and, in many versions by 1944, a small dose of sulfa powder to sprinkle into wounds in hopes of preventing life-threatening infection in the days before widespread battlefield antibiotics. The MK2 Fragmentation Grenade, the classic pineapple, was a cast-iron, notched explosive designed to send deadly shards of steel in all directions. On D-Day, it was used to clear trenches, blast open bunker apertures, or silence machine gun nests that had survived naval bombardment. Heavy, dangerous, and decisive, it had to be treated with respect. 8-round N-block ammo clips were the heart of the Garand system. These steel clips held the cartridges together as a single unit inserted into the rifle. With each shot, the rifle stripped off another round. When the last was fired, the empty clip ejected with the famous metallic ping, sometimes a comforting sound, sometimes a cruel announcement that the magazine was empty at the worst possible moment. The Plyopilm waterproof rifle cover, a simple transparent plastic sleeve, tried to keep sand and salt water out of the Garand during the landing. In theory, a GI could fire right through it without removing it in an emergency. In practice, many tore it off as soon as they hit dry ground, but for those who stumbled or went under, it could mean a functional weapon emerging from the surf. The M1910 Meat Can Mess Kit, usually just called the Mess Kit, was an oval, hinged pan that opened into 2 sections. Used when field kitchens could reach the lines, it carried ladles of hot stew, beans, or whatever the cooks could conjure. It was a small piece of civilization in a world of K-rations and cold canned meat. That kit lived in the M1910 Meat Can pouch, a canvas carrier attached to the haversack. It helped keep the clatter of loose metal down and made it easier to carry utensils and pans as a single unit on marches. K-Ration Boxes were the basic daily combat food, 3 small wax-coated cartons for breakfast, dinner, and supper. Each contained tins of meat or cheese, biscuits, powdered drinks, candy, and cigarettes. Designed for portability rather than pleasure, they provided just enough calories to keep men moving from beachhead to hedgerow. The D-Ration Chocolate Bar was something different, an emergency bar, small but incredibly dense. Formulated to be heat-resistant, bitter rather than tempting, it was meant to be eaten slowly and only when no other food was available. So hard that many soldiers shaved off slices with a knife, it packed a calorie punch far out of proportion to its size. The TL122 Flashlight, with its distinctive right-angle crook neck, clipped to suspenders or webbing. Running on dry cell batteries, it often included filters to preserve night vision and to signal without drawing a sniper's attention. On D-Day, with blacked-out nights and confusing terrain, it was as much a navigation tool as a comfort. U.S. Army dog tags, 2 stainless steel identity discs on a beaded chain, hung at every GI's neck. Stamped with name, serial number, blood type, and religious preference, they served in life for paperwork and in death for burial and notification. One tag stayed with the body, the other could be taken for records or left at a temporary grave. Standard-issue wool socks, though often overlooked in photographs, were among the most important items a man could have. Clean, dry socks were the only real defense against trench foot and blisters, especially when landing craft dumped soldiers into waist-deep water and then marched miles inland over soaked ground. Finally, the compact M5 assault gas mask was introduced specifically for amphibious operations like Normandy. Lighter, flatter, and easier to carry than earlier models, it was intended to protect soldiers from any last-minute German use of gas against the invasion beaches. It never had to fulfill that role, but its presence reflects just how seriously the Allies took that threat. Taken together, this loadout weighed as much as a small child and was expected to be worn under fire, in cold surf, over wet sand, and up steep bluffs into machine gun fire. Every piece had a purpose: to keep a man fighting, moving, eating, bandaging, or simply surviving long enough to reach the next hedgerow. But the gear could not guarantee survival. Many of the men who carried this exact combination of steel, canvas, wool, and paper never made it off the sand. Those who did carried its weight and the memory of those who didn't for the rest of their lives.